Okay, welcome to another exciting segment of Chapter 2. And this time I'm delighted to be joined by one of the ladies I really enjoy following and I had an opportunity to be on her amazing podcast, Laurie Ruderman. So, Laurie, welcome to the show.
Well, I'm pleased to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm delighted to hear to share this absolutely fantastic book, Betting on You. Such a great title. And I even love this, How to Put Yourself First and Finally Take Control of Your Career. God, I've been trying to do that my entire life. And
Yeah, join
now
the
I had
club.
the chance when I could read this book with you. So thank you very much for joining us, and we'll dive into a little bit of this. So, for folks who haven't heard this show before, this is literally like 25 minutes. We're going to get a chance to hear the big idea behind this book, like what inspired Laurie to write it. But we're also going to pick one chapter from the book to do a sort of deep dive on, very specifically understand some of the key tactics. And she's picked an awesome chapter. So I'm very excited to sort of dive into to a little bit of that. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments as we go along. Don't forget to share feedback at the end. But you're going to get so many nuggets in this show. So I'm really looking forward to that. So without further ado, Laurie, tell us a little bit about what inspired you to write this book. You're a phenomenal leader in human and people overall. You've worked with hundreds of different companies,
Yeah,
helping them improve, and your podcast is amazing. So
thanks.
really, what sort of inspired you to write this book?
Well, Barry, thanks for all those kind words. You are now going to be my new agent. We're going to throw my old one, Esmond, to the side because that guy's not saying those nice things. Yeah,
Well, I was looking for a new job, so why not pitch you while I'm here? So that's perfect.
I love it. I love it. Well, I'm pleased to be here. And I will tell you that before I was in human resources, before I, did consulting, before I did all of the things I did as an adult, I identified as a writer. But life got in the way. Student loans got in the way, being an adult got in the way, having a mortgage got in the way. And when I left corporate America because I could not take it anymore, I was burned out, I was exhausted. I went back to my roots, which was writing. Now, I didn't do it overnight and I had a plan, and that's what the book is all about. And the more I talk about my own individual story, which is not something, by the way, I like to do, it's not like I like putting myself at the center of attention. People wanted to learn more. And so that's why I decided to write a book, to use my own life story as a primary case study that you can bet on yourself, you can prioritize your well being, you can focus on continuous learning, you can do all of these things I write about in the book, and you can come out ahead. So that's why I wrote the book, to just show people as possible.
Yeah, and I think there's really no better way to do it than role modeling it in your own
Yeah.
experiences, right? I think that's what makes these stories so personable and so real because they're your stories, right? They're your experiences. And I think that's such an inspiration for folks that, you don't have to be one of these billionaire moguls who sort of have this ridiculous sort of trajectory and story that they tell. This book is just packed with like real stories with real
Yeah.
people, their own experiences, tough challenges they faced, and how you help them step through it. So, tell people like what was the sort of big idea behind the book? Then, what was that? If they were going to take away one lesson
Yeah.
at a sort of highest level, what would be that principle you'd love people to sort of take away?
Sure. Well, I wrote the book with one major thesis, and that is your work, while it's important, is not your worth. You are entitled to an education and to pursue your interests and your passions, and you're entitled to great relationships and to feel good about yourself, regardless of your job title, regardless of what you contribute to a corporation. But that's not necessarily something that feels realistic to people. So the secondary message of the book is okay, we still have to work because none of us are born really of generational wealth. You fix work by fixing yourself first. And if you build this amazing infrastructure where you're living a really great life, when work sucks, and it will, you have other things happening in your world. So I think those are the two ideas, that your work is not your worth, and you fix work when it's broken by fixing yourself. So I want to stop right there, Barry, because you do all of this amazing research. Does that resonate with you as a researcher, as a thinker in the space? Because I wonder about that.
Yeah, so the thing that struck me as I was reading through the book was that you're taking a really scientific approach to problem solving. And it's just the lens we're looking at is you as a person, or me as a person, or the reader as a person. And I love that you call out a lot of these things, like owning this situation that you're in, recognizing what's working for you and not, or trying to do small experiments to see, can you improve the situation, or can you identify and understand yourself, your strengths, your weaknesses, what you like, what you don't like, and then explore those spaces. And I think for me, and more my focus being in a product lens, like that's exactly how we build products. When I talk about unlearning, I often say, just like products have features and you've got to constantly innovate the feature of a product, humans have behavior, and we got to constantly innovate our behavior to adapt to our market. So there was just so
Yeah.
much that sort of resonated for me in these stories, but also the systems that you were showing people to be more intentional, self-aware, and then actually take focused action. And so I think that's what really sort of jumped out
Mm.
at me in a lot of the stories. And I just kept seeing different examples of that, whether I'm having a difficult conversation with somebody who I struggle to collaborate with at work, or
Right.
whether I'm thinking about how do I sort of ask for the pay increase. But maybe this is the perfect moment to transition to the chapter you picked to dive into, chapter 8, which was, again, I just like such a pointed chapter for me, which is great name, Quitting Time, Leave with Dignity and Money in Your Pocket. As soon as I read that on the index, I was like, okay, I'm reading this one. And you open with, again, one of my favorite authors, Irving Welch's quote, "I'm not running away, I'm moving on." So,
That's right.
Bosh, right, tell us a little bit about this chapter, and why did you pick this chapter specifically to do a deep dive on the show?
Well, I love this chapter. It's my favorite chapter in the book because I'm really telling some secrets about how to leave with dignity, how to leave with a sense of self-confidence, and also, to your point, how to leave with a little money in your pocket. So I feel like this chapter is just rich with tips and practical ideas. When I wrote the book, my editor over at Henry Holt told me no bullet points and no 2x2 quadrants. She also said no buzzwords, no jargon. So I had to take these really esoteric concepts about work and organizational psychology and make them more democratic, more accessible. And I really think I nailed it in chapter 8. It really, for me, this chapter is where the rubber meets the road, because so many of us are job squatting or working in positions where we know we have to leave. So how do you do that? And the other thing I love about this chapter is I write about getting fired in there, not just me personally, but other people, and how to recover from that, because the brain doesn't really differentiate between layoffs and being fired. If you're told to go, you're told to go, and you take it personally. So how can you learn from that experience? How can you move on and feel good about yourself? That's the stuff that's in this chapter.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. All right, well, there's a few points I really want to sort of ask you more on, because as I was reading it, there was some great like age-old adages in there that my parents used to say to me, like, don't leave one job until you found another, or I'm still, my mother is saying that in my ears right now. I can hear her saying it to me, right?
Yeah.
But what was really interesting to me is the sort of challenge you put forward to the reader was to really understand, why are you leaving?
Yes.
Because if you don't understand why you're leaving, you're just going to make the same mistakes again and again and again. So can you talk a little bit about helping people like really understand why they might want to leave, as opposed to just leaving because if they're frustrated or feel like they're blocked? Or
Yeah. It's the same thing for people who stay for a lot of years and they feel stuck and they feel helpless. Understanding your why, understanding your behaviors really unlocks opportunity. And so whether you're constantly, finding yourself in these jobs where they don't appreciate you or recognize you, or you finally get that job and it's the arrival fallacy where you show up and you're like, is that all there is? And it's like, dude, yeah, that's all there is, because that's all you are. You haven't really done anything to develop your personal skills and abilities. We all tend to get on the treadmill of life, and nothing amazing happens when we've got our blinders on and we're moving forward. So in the book, I talk about people who, are constantly in these situations. They're blocked, they're frustrated. And I recommend a bevy of things. I hate journaling. I recommend journaling. I hate going back and looking at old performance reviews, but If you want to get better, there's always one little thing in your performance review, even if you're amazing, that you could be working on. So go work on that. I also love the idea of when you leave, leaving with integrity and trying to fill the position that you're leaving from, right? You can recommend really great people, and that way you leave knowing that you haven't left your organization flailing. So there's a lot of things that you can do to really take ownership of your life, Barry, which is, I think, what we're driving to, moving from beyond learned helplessness to saying, you know what, there's only one life, I'm living it, and I have to take some control.
Yeah, no, awesome. There was definitely one bit that sort of piqued my interest, especially on sort of one of these mega trends we're seeing at the moment of sort of gig economy and more people wanting to go freelance, right? Like you talk a little bit about people quitting and sort of getting lost in the gig
Yeah.
economy. I'd just love you to sort of elaborate a little bit on that, because I think that's an interesting trend that's happening at the moment, and might sound interesting, and then people are knee deep in gig economy wondering why the hell they're there. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Thank you. I write about it at a couple points in the book because so many people are betting on themselves right now. Business starts are up. They're at record levels in the United States because people have been laid off or displaced. And they're like, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to hang a shingle and start things, without really understanding that running a business is more than just being a thought leader. It's more than just putting your big ideas out there. There's a true infrastructure at play. And if you've never done that before, it's worth going slow and getting some really good help to understand, what do I need to actually make the business run? There are quarterly and monthly requirements in some municipalities about reporting income.
Oh, yeah.
There are all these weird taxes. There are all these things that you need to do. And if you're not an operator, it's tough to be an owner, because any business that you run that has your name on it, you are both an owner and an operator. So in the book, I give examples of people who are like, I'm done, I'm exhausted, I'm going to go be a consultant, as if being a consultant was ever the answer to anything. Most people don't even like consultants. So why would you want to be that unless you have a real passion for change and you've got internal resilience? But when you go into the gig economy depleted, your potential clients can feel your energy. And why would they work with someone who's burnt out from their old job and looking for a respite? What you really need is a vacation. You really need to take your PTO. Spend some time in that job with your paycheck, thinking, planning, talking to people. I recommend an organization here in America called SCORE, which is out of the Small Business Administration. Go talk to them about putting a business plan together while you still have a paycheck. Because once you get in that gig economy, it is all, I don't even want to use a metaphor because there are so many to use. Like, it's just unhinged. So be careful before you make that decision.
Yeah, like this resonated a lot for me. So like I was living in London and moved to San Francisco to start the business here as a solopreneur, and I just so underestimated, as you described it, the owning versus operating side of like how many things to fill out and learning legislation and am I breaking city law, state law, federal law? What forms do I need to fill out? Wow, I was overwhelmed,
Yes.
And I think when you're trying to just manage like staying like a legitimate business and learning a whole new what you're required to do, that point you mentioned about energy was really fascinating to me too as well, because you need to show up for your clients at 100%, right? There's
more than that.
Differentiates you, right? And I think when you're sort of depleted or confused with all of this operational stuff that has to happen on top of that great work you want to do, I think it's great advice to just sort of ease your way into that or explore that space while you've maybe a bit of a safety net of an existing job, and can you turn your side hustle into a real business or whatever that might be, I think is a really great transition point to share with folks.
In the book, I talk a lot about professional detachment, this idea that you come to work and you treat your colleagues and coworkers and your boss as if they're your clients. And so in a way, you can almost practice being a consultant in your own workplace. Work is not your family, despite the way they lie to you. Work is not full of friends, because generally speaking and statistically speaking, those relationships do not carry over once you exit the building, even if it's a virtual building. They just don't continue on. But if you come to work and show up with dignity and respect, hard work, competence, a work ethic, with the belief that a job worth doing is a job worth doing well, and you leave on time and you just treat this as if they are a client, you're already halfway there to that optimal dream life of a consultant. But Barry, one of the things I think people don't appreciate with going into the gig economy is how expensive it is. Like the first time I had to go out and like buy my own, equipment, or even just going, I was working with the university system and they wanted me to fax them a statement of work. Like, where am I going to find a fax machine? And I can do this from my computer. I spent a half an hour trying to figure out how to fax from my computer. I mean, just stupid stuff. All of that it depletes you emotionally, but it also can deplete you financially if you don't do it right. So
yeah, no, awesome advice, and I'm feeling the frustration. Yeah, because again, the time is the capacity we have, and that's what we can share with our clients.
yeah,
Every
that's
time
right.
we lose that, it's less. So let's ask another piece as well that was sort of, for me, again, one of these like raising moments, should I say, was reading the chapter where you were talking about the differences between exit bonuses and severance pay.
Yeah.
And I think for me, this was again this is like a really interesting, first of all, to understand the differences, but
Sure.
there's, especially here in California, there's companies will pay you money to leave if you're not happy. Is sort of, again, one of these sort of incentives that they'll wave at people and talk about. So can you tell
Sure.
people a little bit about the differences between exit bonuses, severance pay, and then we can dive in a little more after that.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right. There are organizations, usually tech companies, but some not, who will say, you know what, if you're on board and after a couple of months you're not happy, we're going to give you a bonus to leave. And, that's great. It's money in your pocket, no harm, no foul, you leave. So Zappos did that for many years. A lot of small tech companies did that. And they thought they were getting rid of people who weren't a good fit for their culture. Now, we can talk about that because maybe they needed those people more than ever, but okay, that was a thing in our society. Then there are executives who, on the day they walk in, have a written contract and know I need to be here for at least a year, because if I'm here for a year, even if I quit and I don't like it, I get severance. Okay. I get paid to go. And then there are other people who have agreements where they get a severance if a company is purchased. Like, it gets really heady. But there are many executives, many chief marketing officers, sales officers, who know that no matter their performance and no matter whether or not they're enjoying the job or they love the job, whatever it is, they're going to get paid the day they walk out the door. And I find that offensive and crazy and common. And one of the things companies tell people is that there's no severance available for you. And if you leave of your own volition, goodbye, we'll see you. You get your vacation, you get your unpaid PTO, but bye-bye. Or if we lay you off, we may give you a couple of weeks, but you don't ask us for severance. We give it to you because we're your benevolent overlords. And that's actually not true, because in my coaching practice, I advise people on how to get severance, regular working individuals who work in marketing, design, sales, operations. And there's some language that you can use to almost convince the company that A, it's easier for them to pay you to leave, but B, that your job function has changed so much that it actually kind of meets the conditions of, getting severance. So that's all in the book. And I also advise people to talk to lawyers about this, but it's something that if you don't ask for, you will never get. And if you're betting on yourself, you absolutely deserve to be paid to go.
Yeah, again, it was one of these sort of like, as I was reading it, I was like, this, not only I really enjoyed that you were calling out the disparity between how executives sort of have this safe to fail, like they can do whatever and we're still going to get paid. So the
Right.
incentives are all misaligned. And yet, the atypical employee and worker is, it's just like a machine part, and we don't need that part anymore. We'll just throw it away. And so it was just so nice to sort of see something, a little bit controversial, but
Yeah.
like really, really actionable and fair. And so I just thought it was a really great one for people to talk to.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it, provokes people into asking themselves, am I brave? What's the difference between me and an executive, which is really not much, Why them and why not me? And also, if you're hearing no at your organization, you can dig a little bit deeper. Like, have you ever done this for any executives? Can you give me an example of a time? Like you could just
I'm
start to poke
smiling
and
because
prod.
you hold people to account with good questions. Again,
Why
like
not?
no, spot on. And
We're in an age of transparency, so why not force that? You're leaving anyway.
right, but I think again, you've given people guidance to say that there's a language, there's a
Yes.
way to ask these things that has integrity to it,
Yeah.
which I think is again more great tips. But so what one then thing we sort of talked about a little bit at the top of the show was this idea of everybody gets fired. I still remember the first job I got fired from. I got a job in a bar and I worked there for one day. And it was pretty obvious to both obviously the people who run the bar, probably more so, and myself, that I was on the wrong side of the bar. I did my best work on the opposite side. Is what I
Right.
right. And
Hey, don't feed into that stereotype, Barry. Come on now.
all right, okay. No, thank you for calling me on that. So, but I think there's a sort of small little lesson in there as well. So can you share a little bit about like everyone gets fired? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is a saying that comes from my dear friend Jennifer McClure, and that's because she's an executive coach, and people will cry to her, "Oh, I got fired," and she reminds them, "Well, you're in good company. All the Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, all the brilliant men, right? They've all been fired. Artists have been fired, creative souls have been fired, marketing people have been fired, and gone on to launch amazing products. Everybody good gets fired once, because if you're good, that means you don't fit in, or you have countercultural ideas, or you're provocative. And of course, you're not going to fit in everywhere, and you shouldn't fit in everywhere. But the good people learn that lesson about why they made the decision to go into that organization, why they put up with things for so long, why they didn't fit in, what they'll stand for in the future, and what they won't tolerate. And they will make better decisions about their employment. So I think she's right. Everybody good gets fired once. You've never gone to work in a bar again. I got fired from a German restaurant. I spilled a bunch of ketchup bottles and the guy yelled at me. I've never worked in a restaurant ever again in my life, or with anybody who was from Germany, by the way. It was so mean to me. So I really feel like if we can learn a lesson from being fired or being laid off, why we got to where we are, Barry, to your original point at the beginning of the show, why we made the decisions we made, why we're here and not somewhere else. If you can kind of understand that a little bit more, that's going to inform your choices in the future and get you a little bit closer to that beloved happiness.
Yeah, no, it's such awesome advice, and with that in mind, I also want to remind people like this show is a learning opportunity both for myself and Laurie. So we love to hear your feedback on what we've discussed, what parts resonated. All you got to do is go and look for this device, this phone, and you just have to hold it up to the screen and take out your camera and just try and find a dinosaur and take a photo of it, and you'll be amazed. A little link will appear where you can sort of share some feedback with us about what stood out in the show, what you'd like to hear more of, how we can make it better, so we can keep learning as we do this show. And so then before we wrap up, then we're almost perfectly on time, Laurie. What was sort of something that you had to bet on yourself as you were sort of going through this process of becoming an author and bringing this sort of this idea, ambition that many people have to life? What were some of those little turning points or insights for you as you've experienced that journey?
Well, a good career or a terrible career is made up of choices. And as I made the choice to transition into being an author, there were things that I had to give up, revenue streams, opportunities, things I had to say no to. And it was difficult, right? But the more attached I was to the old world, the old way I identified myself, the less likely I could emerge as this person I wanted to be, which is an author, a thinker in the world of work. And so it was very difficult to say no to certain things, very difficult to say no to speaking opportunities, to consulting, to coaching. But there are only so many hours of the day. And if I prioritize my well-being, I'm not going to work 24 hours a day. I'm going to get sleep. I'm going to move. I'm going to get good nutrition. And I'm going to do the work that fuels me and makes the biggest impact. So even self-help authors have to make difficult decisions, and it's painful and it's hard, but I think it's worth it.
Well, I think the end result, that is betting on you, has been more than worth it. I think calling out that we do have to make trade-offs to do great things is really an important part. So thank you again for writing this book. Thank you for coming on the show and dropping so much knowledge bombs. And now I look forward to everyone in the comments sharing their feedback with us in the sort of weeks and months ahead. Take it easy, everyone.
Bye, everybody.